Welcome back to the channel, folks, and to something a little bit different from myself here. I've got the opportunity to do a review of some new buildings, some new terrain for your tabletop. Micro Art Studio have recently introduced this new range of 15mm terrain, really aimed at the Flames of War community, and have sent me a package to try them out, see what they look like, how they go together, how perhaps they would play on the tabletop, and just to let you guys see how they look when they're down on the table, and soon as well how they look in a battle report. The range currently includes all of the buildings you can see here in my fly past on the table. Hopefully it's a range that will increase as the sales increase and it becomes more widely known and popular. So if it is something that you're interested in and like to support, I've put a link in the description down below to the web store. Some assembly is required for these guys. They come flat packed, as you will see, and next we're going to go through the assembly process with some tips. I'm a complete noob when it comes to putting these type of buildings together, folks, so if I can do it, you can do it. So here's what the guys at Micro Art Studio have sent through. First of all, we've got instructions, very clear instructions for all the various houses I've sent, and you can see how many houses we've got here to show you. This is how they arrive, and yes folks, you've got that smell of smoky MDF coming through nice and clear, but they're wrapped up nice and tight. And I've got one, what's that, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sets, but some of them are multiple buildings. So let's see how they go together. Okay folks, I've put my first one together and I've only had to backtrack a couple of times. You know what it's like when you're doing something for the first time? There's always little things that catch you out, so hopefully I'll be catching myself out and you can take advantage of that experience. So there you go folks, that's one that I prepared earlier. Whoops, hold on a minute, there we go. Nice and snug folks, and that wasn't really difficult once I actually just took care about what I was doing and how I was doing it. Just take these off, you can see inside. Very good. Now, one thing that I thought about when I was going through it and basically punching out window frames and so on, I've got all these lovely little components, little perhaps paving stones, paving slabs, little blocks, window frames. This sprue here, I'm going to be keeping all of these folks because these can be very handy in the urban bases that I like to make, you know, where I keep all manner of scraps of stuff, you know, bits of sprue and everything, you know. All of it can be put to great use in rubble. So don't throw out all these bits, guys, if you like to be creative in your basing. But anyway, enough of that. I've got one done, quite a few more to go. So the subject, the how-to, as in watching me making the mistakes for you, is going to be the Townhouse 3. A point worth making before you get started at all folks is be clear on what colour scheme you're going to use. That way you're only going to prepare the pieces that you want and you're not going to accidentally mix in other colours. So for instance, you can see brown, blue, green. These are options for doors, windows, shutters, even the trim on the building here, you've got options. So pick that out in advance and then just work on the areas that you need. Ignore the rest and that will keep you on the right track. Now that we're ready to begin, I'm going to start by removing the protective film that you can see here across the surface of the parts. Now, this film has been placed on to prevent any burn marks on the painted surface, you know, from the laser cutting process. You will see this sort of browning off the paper that I'm peeling off here, and that is coming from the laser. In their instructions, Micro Art Studio does say that there is a risk of some little flakes of paint being peeled off by this sticky film, but I didn't come across any myself. If you do, they recommend just a little touch of paint or suitable coloured pen to put just a little dot on the area that's affected to cover it up. And remember, you need to peel the film off the small components too, but I found that was no problem at all. And remember folks, keep any little odds and ends like these little filling pieces for the window frames. You never know, you might be able to use them in other projects. And of course folks, follow the instructions. If you're not familiar with the individual kit you're working on, you can get very familiar with a unit of 10 tanks that you have made, one after the other, but these houses, they're fairly individual. You're not going to make a lot of them, so follow the instructions. So you're going to know where you're going to be placing windows, shutters, what type of window, what colour are you going to use. Look at the completed pictures on the other side of the instruction sheet too. That can also be a good guide, and that will help you find your way through any complexities or surprises in the kit. For the neatest results, I found that for the windowsills I'd place a bit of glue on the inside edge. That way you're not going to get glue spilling out over the front of the printed surface. And then for the window frames, a little bit of glue on two sides and leaving the top and the bottom clear, and then just carefully squeezing it into the opening so that any glue is going to get pushed out once again onto the rear of the wall. That's the interior surface, not the surface that you're going to see. As recommended by Micro Art Studios, I am using white glue to stick these together. Super glue is always an option, but if you make a mistake, especially with one of these windows, you're not going to fix it, if you've used super glue. So white glue allows you to move things around, set things up. After you've done your dry fitting, for instance, you can still get things wrong. Super glue will not allow you to correct any such mistakes. White glue will. And as you will see as I'm working through this, it doesn't really present any problems with the drying time the white glue has. It's very easy to just set the thing down and keep it together whilst the glue is setting up. Next I'm going to apply the trim and shutters that get attached to the walls here. I want to do that before I start putting the walls together so that everything is all in place and I can just move on to one next step for that floor, which is this sort of completed assembly. The safest way of going off plan, so to speak, with the construction is the shutters. You could have the shutters all on the ground floor or some on the upstairs, or you can mess about with them if you want to make multiples of the same kind of house look different, not only in terms of colour but in finish. Now we're ready to put the floor together. In this case, as you can see, it's the ground floor. Now I'm not waiting until the glue on the windows and trims and such has set up. You can just keep working on. You just have to be careful that you don't accidentally move any components that are stuck on the flat outside surface. Just give it a quick visual examination when you've finished this next stage of the assembly, and the white glue, being very flexible, will allow you just to tweak it back into place if any component has been moved. Now these walls interlock in particular ways, and it might be different between floors and kits, so I recommend a dry fit so you're prepared and you can glue them up and place them in the most effective order, to take that into consideration. Once you have the closed box, so to speak, of the floor all together, you're going to have to just put it into shape, because it's going to be moving around a bit as we're putting everything together. Here I'm doing a little bit of tidy up as well in any glue that has been pressed out from the joints, and then just keep it square top and bottom, set it aside, and then we're ready to work on another floor whilst that's drying up. So once again folks, referring to the instructions is important. Make sure you're getting the right floor part, the right wall sections, and then also once again making sure you are taking the correct colour schemes from the various windows that you've got on here. As with the first floor, I'm going to assemble all the various wall components before I glue them all together. Now the first floor has these 4 recesses in the corners in which these tabs are glued. These tabs allow it to lock into the ground floor, without it slipping and sliding across the surface. Be careful with the orientation when you glue these in. There is a slight slope on the outside edges of each one to allow them to slide in a little bit more easily, so just make sure you've got them glued in at the right way. Now I recommend, after you've got the whole floor finished, i.e. the walls are in place on the floor, that you take this section and fit it into the ground floor. That way you're going to make sure that these tabs are not too tight or just slightly out of place, and you can easily place and remove the upper floor from the ground floor. And if you do that before the glue sets, you're going to have no problems. Good example of why you should read the instructions, folks, because I thought that window there was the same as the other ones, but it doesn't have a sill, and I thought maybe it was these small windows, but no, it's just one of the ordinary size windows without a sill. That's why using white glue instead of super glue could be vital in these situations, folks, and why it's always best to read, follow and understand the instructions. And the floor goes together the same as the ground floor. Once again, remember a bit of dry fitting will help catch out any difficult areas, and then, as I said before, I'm going to match it up and make sure it fits nice and snug but removes off nice and easy, and that way I can be sure as well that things are coming together nice and square. I'm now going back to the ground floor to put the doors in. Now there's actually 2 different size doors for the 2 different size openings, so take that into account for other houses in this range you might be putting together. There's also, you've got to remember what side the door handle's on. It's a small point, but it's one worth remembering. The door handle will be on the right, so bit of dry fitting, a little bit of glue placed on the inside surface of the wall so that you can easily place the door up against it, and try not to slide the door around as you're doing that, because that's going to quite easily spill glue onto the outer surface, like the painted surface of the door, if you're lifting it off the wall. So a bit of care here will get you the best results. So we've got the ground floor and the first floor completed. Now we need to go on to the roof. Now the roof is a much more complex proposition just because of its shape. It's not simply a box, but here we've also got a dormer window, so we've got all the various components that need to come together nice and square to get a nice finished roof. So dry fitting, looking at instructions, looking at the picture of the finished item is important here, folks, and that will keep you well prepared for the next steps. When assembling the roof, I found the gables to be the trickiest because you've got 2 slabs of HDF. I keep wanting to call it MDF, but it's HDF, folks, and you're gluing them together, which is quite a large surface, and the glue itself doesn't set up straight away like super glue does, so they might want to separate. But I got around that at the end of the process after I got the roof surface on, and I just sat it on its end with a little bit of weight pressing down through the length of the roof, and that just tied everything together quite nicely. So don't get frustrated here, folks, just put a bit of weight on it as it dries, but remember that's weight going from one gable down through the roof towards the other gable on a flat surface. In this build I put the sort of masonry features that go down the side of the walls. I put that on at this stage. There's no need to, you can put it on at an earlier stage. My concern was how it was going to interact with the trim going along the bottom of each floor, including the roof floor. There's one there as well, because if these side edges are too tall or misplaced, that will lift the floor up a bit, because the trim will not be able to go down low enough for a tight fit. So just be careful with that. You don't have to hold it off till this stage. I held it off because I wasn't 100% confident about how I was doing it, but it should be completed as you're doing each floor in turn. So now back to the roof. Now you can see the gables are a little bit wobbly here, but that's just white glue for you folks. Just be patient. Once the slate area of the roof and the sloped area is in place, it'll all start to come together much more strongly. So at this point, I want to make sure it's square. There are little tabs that push down through the floor here, or the attic floor, to give you a nice tight fit, just as with the first and second floor. So make sure that everything's square, and then a bit of dry fitting. You can see how that keys into the chimney stack there, folks. So just make sure that is all lined up, you know where things are going, and then we can start some gluing. Now I'm working with the roof in place on the rest of the building just now, because it isn't as solid a structure as the boxy other floors are. The wall joints, where they come together, are very small. They're not keyed as strongly, so it is going to move around a bit. So keeping it where it is will help me keep the right shape. And then, as I said before, I will set it up with some weight so it all dries nice and tight together. And folks, I almost forgot the dormer window. I was so concerned about getting the rest of the roof right. So just be careful, folks. These little things can slip past you if your focus is on another aspect of the kit. But it's easy enough for me to do it. The dormer roof isn't in place, and even if it was, it's white glue, folks. So we can take things off and put them back again. That's the advantage of white glue. So after I got the window in place, I put a little dormer roof on, and that was me done, folks. Overall, I found the process to be surprisingly straightforward. I thought these kits were going to be quite complicated when you look at all the various components that you've got, but it's actually quite straightforward. Once you put one together, the next one goes together easier, and so on and so on. Just follow the instructions, folks. Dry fit, use white glue, and I think you yourself will find it to be a fairly easy, straightforward process to assemble these. Before we look at the finished buildings, let's consider some of the key points that I have learned whilst putting these together. Point 1. Read and understand the instructions. In particular, the little components such as windows and window sills and such likes and doors. They're not all the same size, folks, so just make sure you know what one you've pulled out and what one is going into what opening. Point 2. Select your colour options. I would recommend you get all your parts sorted and organised in advance, so you know what colour window frames are going with what colour walls, what colour shutters and such likes. The pictures of the finished products on the reverse of the instructions are a good guide, but of course you can go your own way and choose the colour schemes that you want. Point 3. Peel the protective paper off slowly. If you go quick, you're likely to cause the tiny little flakes of paint that can happen, but if you take your time, there's likely to be no chips at all in my experience. Point 4. Push the sections up through the painted surface. By that I mean have the painted surface facing you and then push the sections up. That way any snags that could perhaps tear the painted surface will only tear the unpainted side, because that's the side that will potentially snag on the way out. The painted surface will have a nice clear exit route. Point 5. Use white glue. I don't recommend super glue for the main components especially, because if you make a mistake you're not going to be able to fix it, folks, and the white glue will set up quick enough for you really if you're careful in how you're handling it, so you're not going to have any problems with things moving unexpectedly, shall we say. And of course, if you get glue in your fingers, clean them off, because you don't want to be putting gluey fingerprints all over the surface. Point 6. Final point here, folks, but an important one. Be creative and have fun. You've got these buildings that look exceptionally good when they come out of the packaging, but that's just the starting point. You can add to that in so many different ways, and even just something as simple as I've suggested myself in the video of using all the little push out parts from the window frames and so on in your rubble bases. So have some fun, folks. So here we have all of the houses completed and on the tabletop. I'm going to record a battle report using this terrain here as well, folks, so stay tuned to the channel. That will hopefully be out on the Friday after this video goes up. So overall, I think they look great, folks. What do you think? Stick your comments down below, but I'm sure you'll be quite happy with them. If you like this high density fiberboard type terrain and you're missing other suppliers that are not around anymore for the pre-painted stuff, well, I think this could be a really good option for you. I will certainly be using them on a regular basis, and you know what, folks, when we go to our monthly meetups in Bathgate at Nightly Gaming, I'll be bringing these rather than the big heavy resin pieces because they're so much lighter and in some respects also much more durable. You know, they're not going to chip in the same way as resin does. So resin for the house, these guys I think for the road. Now I know what you're thinking, folks, because I've been thinking the same thing. How many bases can we fit inside these buildings? So let's have a look at the townhouse size buildings. The larger buildings, well, they're just big. You know, you can fit a lot of bases in these larger buildings. But let's look at the more sort of medium sized buildings. So townhouse 3, what have we got? Well, you can get 3 medium bases in there, which isn't bad. And the good thing is, folks, is there is space. This is a quite important point from my perspective, the space for the bases. And what that means is if you have any bases where the rifles or MGs or such like extend past the front of the base, well, you've got a bit of wiggle room, so they're not scraping up against the walls. So that's good. That's an important point for me. Now this is a cafe. You're going to get 2 bases in here, once again with wiggle room. You could get 2 small bases in there too, folks, if you're stacking it full of bazookas or Panzerschrecks. Now these little houses, this is, what townhouse is this, folks? This is townhouse 1. Right, so top floor, well, you know what, it's a bit complicated. You're just going to have to say somebody's in there, I would say, folks. Lifting that off, it's a bit tricky. That's more of a complete construction to my mind, though you may be able to manage it yourself. So you can have 1 medium and 1 small on each floor. And you could say the same with up there, just because they've got the dormer windows. And once again, whoops, let's try and take that off. That's a bit tighter in there, folks, but it's not surprising considering the size, but still a good fit for 2 bases. So hopefully you find that interesting, folks, both in terms of a product that you might like to add to your collection and as a guide to how to put them together and how they look on the table. Thanks to the guys at Micro Art Studio for sending them along to me. I'm glad I've had the chance to try them out. This is something I never had a chance to do in the past because of the terrain that I already had, but I am very glad to have this in my collection as an option for the games and the battle reports and playing away with my friends and all those things going forward. Now there is a link down below, folks, in the description if you want to check these out in the Micro Art web store. So that's us for this video, folks. Check out the battle report that's coming up on this table, and there's going to be some stills coming up at the end as well, just for a bit of sort of table eye candy for you folks, just to wind down the end of the video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you all on the next one.